Chosen one, pause and feel this. Imagine a titan of industry and imagination. The kind who builds rockets at SpaceX, rethinks transport at Tesla, and sketches the next chapter of human destiny. Pausing, noticing, and asking a single question. Do you see it the way I see it? Whether literal or symbolic, that gaze is not about fame. It's about recognition. It's the world way of saying, someone powerful has sensed the same frequency you carry. You've been through the fire. The last bell has sounded. The battles that try to bury you only fed your roots. What they meant for defeat became your secret fertilizer. That's the thing about chosen ones. Pressure doesn't crush you. It crystallizes you. A visionary like Elon, with a mind for rockets, neural frontiers, and impossible timelines, recognizes people who've learned to breathe underwater. Those who turn silence into strategy and patience into leverage. If a mind that dreams of Mars and rewrites industries is intrigued by you, it's because you carry a similar courage. The stubborn refusal to accept the obvious limits. The willingness to be reshaped in private so you can perform in public. This is not about celebrity. It's about alignment. Do your values match the vision you've been glimpsing in your sleep? Will you build, steward, and lead the work you were made for? Not for applause, but for impact? Stand tall. Keep tending your inner soil. The whispers, the slights, the nights no one noticed, they were not wasted. They were training. The cycle of struggle is ending because you changed. Now the world's eye, whether represented by a billionaire innovator or by destiny itself, is simply the mirror showing you that your season has arrived. When giants look, they do not only judge, they look for partners. Type, I share the vision, if this resonates, and move forward with quiet boldness. Your roots hold. Your rise is ordained. You learned how to convert flames into fuel, not that you were exempt from the fire. If this message is already deeply affecting you, chosen ones, don't keep it to yourselves. Please show your support by clicking the like button and becoming a subscriber to this channel. Our capacity to continue delivering these impactful, transformative, and energizing messages to you is fueled by each tap, remark, and share. Not only does your support benefit us, but also makes our community of chosen ones stronger, more vocal, and unstoppable. Therefore, stand with us, selected ones, and let's rise together if this information makes you feel better. I know some of you are wondering, but how can I be certain that it's really over? What if everything returns? Pay close attention, selected ones. Only those who reject the lesson experience cycles again. You didn't fight. You persevered. You asked. You thought about it. You changed. You received your degree. And graduation is a certain thing. The same classroom cannot be used again. You're not haunted by the tests you have previously passed. They provide space for advancement. Consider it this way. Consider a game in which the adversary controls the board, moves the pieces, and establishes the rules. They win as long as you continue to play. However, the game is finished as soon as you get up and turn the board. By outplaying them, you didn't win. By not playing at all, you beat them. They're now really irritated because of this. You cease to respond. Where you used to bleed, you stopped. You stopped providing food for their circus. And their authority crumbled without your involvement. They became weaker, but the chains remained intact. You became stronger, so they broke. This is what they never wanted you to know, chosen ones. Their power was destroyed the instant you understood that your worth was not dependent on their acceptance. You regained responsibility for yourself. And every deception, every manipulation, and every invisible prison vanished the moment you asserted your ownership. Asking if you're free is not necessary. Right now, the solution is the quiet after the storm. Some of you may be wondering whether the silence is an emptiness. Was life becoming too slow? No. Selected ones. There isn't emptiness there. It is proof. That's the sound of triumph. Type Amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. The silence is not emptiness. After the dust has settled, the battlefield is where all the weapons have fallen and all the enemies have fled because you refuse to fall. Peace is not the same as nothing. It's evidence of your victory. I'll give you another reason why it's finished. The settings that used to imprison you are no longer suitable for you. It would be like trying to squeeze an ocean into a teacup to return to old connections, old circles, and old poisonous environments. You no longer belong there. The walls are too little. The air is too thin. Additionally, the energy is lower than the amount you now possess. Because of this, even if the past attempted to come back to you, it couldn't. It can't affect you since you've soared too high. Because healing was your form of retaliation, your adversaries feel uneasy, chosen ones. Every scar that used to bleed freely has been turned into a barrier that they are unable to breach. All of the wounds they used to control you have transformed into uncontrollable knowledge. Without a word of reprisal, your mere recovery destroyed their plans. Your recovery thus speaks louder than any argument ever could. Their defeat was your survival. Their assessment is your development. And pay close attention to me. You made it through the worst. Their greatest error was that, believing that you would be destroyed if you threw their largest stone. But you put up with it. It implies that nothing they toss now will ever be sufficient. You're still standing even if the worst has already occurred. That is irrevocable evidence of your invincibility. You've adjusted your boundaries. You're no longer fazed by things that used to frighten you. Congratulations, those who were selected. You didn't just go away. You changed. You entered the fire and emerged completely changed. You are no longer the kind of person who might be controlled by outdated strategies, imprisoned by outdated cycles, or shattered by outdated wounds. The line behind you is sealed after you cross the line. No sequels, reboots, or replays. Completed. It will be seen by everyone. Just your existence is proof that the conflict was worthwhile. Each scar serves as evidence. Every advancement is evidence. Your every peaceful breath is evidence. This goes beyond just survival. Evolution is what it is. It's mastery. It's an announcement that the previous chapter is now permanently closed. So, selected ones, take a proud stance. The last bell has sounded. The battle is over. And it is something you will never have to experience again. And I want to thank you for being here, the one who was selected and is now watching. Your existence is evidence that you have risen, that you have endured, and that you are prepared for the next phase. If this message resonates deeply with you, demonstrate your power by clicking like, subscribe, and comment with the number 11 to signal the end of the old cycle and the beginning of the new you. And click the special thanks button if you want to help us even more. It enables us to continue crafting these potent, transformative messages just for you. I promise you that if you are actually selected, you will be able to identify every indication that everything has been completed. So let's get started step by step. It's done, and that won't ever happen to you again. First of all, the lesson was far from over. The battleground just become too big for you. The lesson continued. The battleground just become too big for you. They believed you were permanently buried in the same classroom, but you slammed the door behind you as you left, holding the diploma. Lean in, my beloved chosen ones. The opponent doesn't want you to understand this. Because life suddenly got easier for you, the cycle did not end. Because someone chose to feel sorry for you, it didn't end. You became too large for the battlefield that once contained you, which is why it ended. Everything that fire was supposed to teach you, you took in, and there's nothing left there for you to discover. The fact that you suffered is not the biggest dread of the opponent. It's because you recognize the pain, because you become free once you comprehend. And it's the end of their game once you get out. Consider it. Kindness doesn't stop a storm. When a storm has finished its task, it pauses. That's where you are at the moment. Knowing that you graduated from the storm rather than just surviving it, you stood in the quiet after the thunder. The instructor has nothing else to teach you, which is why it won't happen again. And let me be honest with you, selected ones. The individuals who are always running in circles are still seated in the same classroom that you left. You cannot be compared to them because of this. Because of this, you are misinterpreted. Grades are not being repeated by you. You're on your way. Type amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. Those who refuse to learn are punished by repetition. Those that do are rewarded with promotions. They'll do it again. You'll get up. The divide is that. I'm aware of the questions some of you are now asking yourselves. However, how can I be certain that it's really done? Can I get back into it? Your own development holds the solution. Because there is no longer a version of you that fell for the previous patterns, they can no longer trap you. You've become too intelligent to fall for the same tricks, too steady to crumble under the same pressure, and too astute to fall for the same traps. Even the thing that once vanquished you is no longer a suitable opponent. You're too old for that league. Returning would be like to challenging a chess expert to a game of tic-tac-toe. With your increased level of strategy, the board is too tiny. Chosen ones are aware of this. Every tear shed, every betrayal, and every restless night wasn't in vain. They were included in a curriculum that was created just for you. And even though it was painful, you paid attention, in contrast to some who sat there rejecting, accusing, and whining. The cycle broke because of this. You were vigilant, not because you were fortunate. You took the lesson from the suffering and applied it to your future. That is the difference between a chosen one and a survivor. The survivors get away. Selected ones change. I'll show you a photo. Think of suffering as a furnace. Before they've absorbed anything, most individuals attempt to claw their way out of the flames by screaming, flailing, and resisting. You didn't. You endured, stretched, and burned as you stood there until you eventually absorbed the flames. You will never experience it again because of this. Not because there are no furnaces, but because you're no longer seen as fuel by the flames. You're now impervious to fire. Also, don't overlook this. No needless suffering is recycled in life. Teaching the same lesson repeatedly is a waste of time. If it's ended, it's because you've already gotten as much instruction as possible out of it. The storm had a time limit, and your development set it off. You didn't just make it through. You finished the coursework. You've received a promotion. Your resolve to remain tied was always stronger than the shackles that previously restrained you. You won the instant you decided to look beyond the suffering rather than let it consume you. Because they're unable to comprehend how you survived fire and emerged untouchable, your opponents are now uneasy. They believed that shattering you would destroy you, but it just took away the pieces of you that no longer belonged. The polished version of you is impervious to the same assaults, stronger and sharper. Therefore, when someone says, "I'm glad that's over," they're unaware of the reality. The storm wasn't the only thing that finished. That storm was necessary because of your devotion to the version of yourself. That person is no longer there. The storm lost power because of this. Look around you, selected ones. Because they refuse to learn, some are still caught in the turmoil from which you fled. They disregarded the murmurs of their suffering. In their own pain, they mute the teachings. Type Amen to embrace the angel's blessings. Show your support by giving super thanks up to $20. They repeat cycles as you climb because of this. Favoritism isn't involved. It's not a coincidence. It's progress. You receive your degree. They didn't. Listen to this and let this soak in. It's not because life got kinder all of a sudden that you won't have to experience it again. You become unbreakable. That's why. Now you are wise. Now you are strong. You now possess clarity. A shield that is impenetrable by an adversary is formed by those 3 items. Chosen ones, you pass the exam. You are no longer claimed by the battleground that previously characterized you. You can't avoid obstacles. Simply said, you've changed enough that the same old problems no longer matter. Since they're no longer on your level, they're unable to touch you. It's ended because of this. It's done for that reason. So take a proud stance. Don't wonder whether the storm will come again. It won't. There is nothing left for the instructor to teach you. It's time for a promotion now that you've graduated. Because you are more than what you endured, the cycle is broken. And that's the strength of outgrowing the battlefield, my beloved chosen ones. Second, your training ground was agony, and you left with your certification in hand. Your curriculum was pain, and you left with your diploma. You made your pain become your degree, even though they intended it to be your jail. Hear me clearly, chosen ones. Too many individuals see suffering as a kind of retribution, as if life were cruelly punishing them for their wrongdoing. The adversary wants you to believe that delusion. You have been cursed because of that anguish. that your battle showed your weakness. The reality, however, is more incisive than that. There was never any consequence for pain. It was a classroom. You didn't simply sit with your head down in the back, either. You persevered through the lessons. You graduated after taking the notes, which were written in tears. Before enrolling you, life never requested your consent. You were not enrolled in this program by anybody. You just woke up one day in a classroom where the textbook was betrayal, the lecture was disappointment, and the test was heartache. It felt unjust at first, even intolerable. Each exam was unexpected. Through the solitude of your loneliness, some lessons were communicated. Others made sure you were listening by slamming the desk so loudly that it shattered your heart. And it was shaping you into someone unbreakable, despite the fact that it felt terrible and caused wounds. Reflect on the past. Selected ones. Recall your previous reaction to failure. You're no longer even scratched by the same barriers that previously broke you. It's no coincidence that shift occurred. It is proof. Proof that you have progressed to a level that was unattainable for the elderly. You learned perseverance through sleepless nights. Betrayals helped you become more astute. Your thankfulness was cultivated through loss. Silence itself even turned into a teacher, teaching you to see things that others miss. You were trained, not simply able to survive. And that instruction was accurate. It shaped you into someone who can see through deception, discern intentions that others miss, and move with an apparent knowledge that belies your age. Graduation is that. Let's go right to the point. For those who refuse to learn its lessons, pain is repeating. This explains why some individuals continue to live in poisonous cycles year after year. Life restarted the test since they won't learn. However, you picked them and didn't object. You leaned into the chaos, the heartache, and the flames. Even when the responses were mute, you continued to ask inquiries. When it would have been simpler to numb yourself, you thought. When giving up would have been the simple solution, you persevered. That's what sets you apart. Instead of allowing grief to destroy you, you use it to mold you. You won't ever have to go through that level again as a result. Life will still put you to the test after graduation. Since you have already learned all it has to teach you, you will never have to confront that same difficulty at that exact intensity. That exam no longer has any influence over you. It has no authority in your tail now that it has fulfilled its function. You left with a credential that no school in the world could ever give out. The level of unwavering knowledge, spiritual survival, and emotional intelligence. And though selected, that degree is universally accepted. Every room you enter and every obstacle you now encounter bears the tacit recognition that you have already survived the fire and come out stronger. You stand differently as a result. Your energy feels sharper, heavier, and indisputable as a result. You are evidence that pain was worthwhile. It was tuition. You graduated stronger after paying for it with tears. For this reason, the cycle is over. You are no longer confined to classes. What previously broke you now seems like a kid's puzzle since you've advanced to a new level. And it's meant to be just that way. Because a new chapter in your life is now beginning. One that calls for the knowledge you have worked so hard to acquire. It wasn't agony that made you crawl. You took the certificate proving your mastery of it with you when you left. Congratulations, those who were selected. Pain believed it would break you. It taught you instead. You can't go back now that you've graduated. Third, the instant you quit playing their game, their control crumbled. You stopped following their rules, thus you ruined the game. They used your responses to construct a throne. Their dominion was reduced to dust as you got up and left the stage. Listen carefully, chosen ones. The whole process came to an abrupt halt when your hands ceased feeding their equipment. Toxic control, manipulation, and oppression do not flourish on power. They thrive on involvement. They need your defense, your explanation, your sobs, and your desperate proof. They want you to bow, to rush for their approval, to give their story life. Their empire of influence vanishes if that is taken away. The abusers don't want you to know it, since it's an unpleasant and direct secret. You signed a lease for their electricity, which is leased. How many battles did you win by providing an explanation? How many evenings did you sacrifice your own tranquility to restore someone else's reputation? How many times have you expressed regret for being human while they continued to act in that way? Their authority was bolstered by such investments. By allowing yourself to react in a certain way, rather than by what they did, you handed them power. Their harshness was never the only trap. You were still on the board when they set it down. The pieces didn't matter after you stopped playing. You may believe that in order to be free, you need a public takedown, a spectacular expose, or a war cry. You don't. The most destructive triumph is imperceptible, a silent cutting off of power. Everything they put in place to manage you becomes useless when you stop paying attention, using your time, and providing explanations. Being silent does not equate to giving up. It's a tactic. Weakness is not indifference. It's the most successful kind of opposition. The pressing is useless the moment you decide not to bend. Two are needed for oppression: the one who pushes and the one who gives way. When the yielding is removed, the force loses its significance. Now that you're thinking, but if I walk away quietly, won't they just try harder? Maybe they will, at least for a little while. However, their strategies are rehashed. Only when they see that their typical levers are still functional do they escalate. Their paradigm breaks when those levers click and there is nothing to grasp. They thrash about and then back off. You don't match loudness with cruelty to break the pattern. By declining to verify it, you put a stop to it. Their system is shocked by such rejection. No drama, no response, no fuel. Think of manipulators as a badly staged play. The villains rely on gasps from the audience. The audience was you. You delivered the standing ovation, the tears, and the cheers. Then you stopped going one day. The lights went out. The performers stared about in confusion. Because the drama of the play depended on the audience, it was unable to continue. You did not need to yell fraud. You just walked out of the theater. The last act was that departure. Furthermore, this is not a passive transformation. It's a tough choice. It says, I will no longer validate manipulation. I will no longer negotiate my worth for someone else's comfort. I will not spend my life patching holes they keep cutting. The strength to do that does not come from denial. It comes from clarity. You learn the rules of the game, how they bait, how they gaslight, where they thrive. Awareness becomes armor. Knowing the mechanics of control means you can't be tricked the same way again. Your silence, your boundary, your calm. These are shields no puppet master can pierce. Chosen ones, this is the practical truth. Oppression ends when you reclaim your energy. Not because the oppressor changed their mind, but because their target changed. They are still the same people with the same tactics, but you're no longer the same person who could be baited. You carry a new posture, quiet, immovable, unbothered. That posture repels attempts to wound. It doesn't engage in drama, because drama is their currency and you've gone cashless. So when you feel the urge to explain, to chase, to prove yourself, pause and remember what you learned. Every time you refuse to react, you build immunity. Every time you claim your peace, you erode their infrastructure. The cycle is over because you stop feeding it. The power they once held was never in their hands alone. It lived in your responses. You pulled the plug. You walked off the stage. And now their show is canceled. Number 4, pressure didn't break you. It expanded what you could carry. They aimed to break you. You became bigger than their cage. They built a prison expecting a broken body. Instead, they widened the walls and found themselves locked out. Chosen ones, listen close. This is the truth the architects of your pain never wanted you to know. Their strategy was limited by imagination, not by force. They planned for fracture, for the precise angle of a crack. They measured pressure and assumed you'd respond the way everyone else did. But pressure doesn't always produce collapse. Sometimes it produces expansion. Where they expected your seams to split, you learned to stretch. Where they expected to shatter, you became more capacious. That is not accidental. That is proof. You might be wondering, how could being squeezed make me larger? The answer is simple and brutal. The human spirit is elastic when trained. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every unjust blow taught you balance. Every humiliation taught you how to carry dignity without needing permission. Under the exact forces meant to reduce you, you rewired your capacity. You learned new muscle groups of the soul: endurance, restraint, deeper empathy, sharper clarity, and each of those muscles expanded your volume. You didn't simply patch the cracks, you remodeled the entire structure. Think of it like a metal forged under heat. They hoped the heat would melt you down. Instead, the heat tempered you. The same fire that was meant to melt became the forge that made you denser, stronger, and able to contain more. Your capacity to love didn't shrink. It deepened. Your ability to hold truth didn't fracture. It widened. You became a vessel with more room for power, peace, and purpose. That's evolution on purpose. Now let's get raw. Some of you are asking, does that mean I won't feel pain again? Number expansion doesn't equal immunity. You will still feel pressure. But the difference now is scale and response. Before, pressure broke you because your internal architecture couldn't support it. Now, pressure reveals new edges of your capacity. Instead of exposing weak points, you bend and return. You absorb and convert. Where others would crack and fall apart, you hold more. More responsibility, more vision, more calm in chaos. That's the chosen distinction. And to those who engineered your limits, this is your message. You miscalculated. You designed cages for the people you knew yesterday. You underestimated the possibility that the very thing you used to confine someone would be the exact mechanism of their growth. They aimed for defeat. They gifted evolution. They aimed for reduction. They created expansion. That is the irony that fuels your rise. Their intent becomes the raw material of your legacy. Chosen ones understand the practical side of this. How expansion shows up as greater tolerance for complexity, as the ability to make harder decisions with less noise, as steadier leadership in moments others panic. It means you can carry more responsibility without sacrificing your center. It means you can love more wisely, act more decisively, and stand more immovable in your truth. These are not abstract virtues. They are functional advantages. They make the world bend to your integrity instead of you bending to the world's cruelty. So when you see the same old players circling, when they test the edges hoping for a familiar collapse, let them find nothing but widened walls and closed doors. Let them discover that the blueprint they used no longer fits the structure they tried to control. You are not weaker because you were pressed. You are wider because you were honest with your pain and used it as scaffolding. This is why the cycle is over. They aimed to fracture you, but they only widened you. They counted on limitation. You answered with expansion. They intended to shrink your world. Instead, you expanded the landscape of who you are and what you can carry. That transformation is permanent because expansion changes not just surface, but capacity. It rewrites what can hold, what can love, and what can lead. Stand in that truth, chosen ones. Wear your widened walls like armor and like proof. Let their miscalculation be your testimony. You did not merely survive under pressure. You became the example of what pressure is meant to produce. A larger, stronger, more capacious self. The cage they wanted to build now holds only their old versions of power, while you move forward, unstoppable and immeasurably larger than the battlefield they imagined. Number 5. The season closed the second you took back ownership of yourself. You took back the keys. The season closed when you reclaimed your life. They tried to rent your silence and sell your worth. You reclaimed the deed and changed the locks. Chosen ones, listen close. This is the moment the enemy never planned for. The day you stopped being a passenger and started being the driver. For too long, your value, your limits, your choices, even your right to breathe were being negotiated by voices that didn't have your best interests at heart. Trauma whispered, manipulators negotiated, fear drew invisible fences, and you moved inside a cage that felt normal simply because you'd lived there long enough. But then something shifted. You said enough. Quietly, without fanfare, you placed your hand on the steering wheel of your life and refused to let anyone else steer it. That small, sovereign act closed the season. What does reclaiming your life actually look like? It's not always dramatic. It's rarely cinematic. It's 1,000 tiny refusals. Refusing to apologize for setting a boundary. Refusing to explain yourself to people who profit from your doubt, refusing to sacrifice your peace to keep someone else comfortable. Ownership is a steady, unflashy authority. It doesn't need permission. It is a decision made in the privacy of your heart that the rest of the world must adapt to, not the other way around. The moment you choose yourself first, the scripts written to control you lose their ink. You might be thinking, is claiming my life really that powerful? Will the cycle be broken by that alone? Yes, because the whole structure of manipulation depends on participation. Oppressors profit when you consent to doubt, to shrink, to beg for approval. Take that consent away and the structure collapses. Once you stop agreeing to be lesser, those who relied on your compliance are suddenly irrelevant. They keep playing the old game, but you've already left the table. The season couldn't continue because its curriculum assumed you'd stay enrolled. You dropped the class permanently. Picture it like this. For years, you were renting a room in someone else's house of expectations. You paid with your confidence, your decisions, your inner peace. Then you discovered the deed was in your name the whole time. You walked into that house and locked the doors from the inside. The people who came knocking, demanding rent or approval, found the locks changed and the windows shuttered. They had no jurisdiction anymore. That is sovereignty. Your personal jurisdiction over your mind, your body, and your future. Reclaiming yourself also rewires perception. Where you once read insults as truths, you now read them as noise. Where you once saw traps, you now see tests you have already passed. The filters trauma installed begin to get uninstalled. You start to see people, situations, and motives for what they are, not what your fear taught you they were. That clarity is dangerous to manipulators and freeing to you. The season closes because the lesson has been internalized. Repetition becomes pointless when the learning has landed. And let's deal with the fear head on. What if reclaiming my life makes me lonely? What if I lose people? Yes, some doors will close. And that's the point. The rooms that can't hold your new boundary will fall away, revealing the space you actually need. Loneliness in this phase is not loss. It's renovation. It's the clearing of debris so new architecture can be built. Real sovereignty demands that you no longer mortgage your peace for company that takes without giving. Those who stay will respect your terms. Those who leave only prove why the season had to end. This is rebellion in its purest form. Not loud or vengeful, but complete. You rebel against being defined by someone else's script. You declare that your thoughts, your actions, and your destiny answer to you and you alone. That is the greatest coup. No more coercion, no more puppetry. Your life becomes self-authored, and nothing external can edit that manuscript without your consent. So stand firm, chosen ones. The season closed because you reclaimed the keys. You moved from passenger to proprietor, from victim to steward, from reactive to intentional. That ownership is not temporary. It's a new operating system. And under this new governance, the old cycles have no standing. You are sovereign now, and sovereignty is final. Number 6, returning is impossible because the old you no longer exists. You can't walk back. The old you is left at the entrance. They built the cage for who you used to be, not for the one who walked out and started building doors. My dear chosen ones, listen. The fiercest truth of transformation is uncompromising. You will never return because the person who entered that storm no longer exists. That's not a feel-good line. It's a final hard-edged fact. Life only repeats its harshest lessons for those who stay the same. But you changed at a level so deep that the pattern simply can't find purchase anymore. Think about a caterpillar and a chrysalis. The place that once fit your body was perfect for the old version of you. But metamorphosis isn't a surface update. It's a complete rewrite. You walked into the same circumstances as someone vulnerable, uncertain, shaped by fear and conditioned responses. You came out as someone with new instincts, new limits, and a new operating system. The prison wasn't only the people or situations around you. It was the you that agreed to be small. Once that version dissolved, the walls lost their meaning. You might be wondering right now, what if I get pulled back by old triggers? What if the same hands reach for me? That's a fair question. The difference is this. Triggers can still appear, but they no longer land the way they used to. Imagine an old lock and a new key. The key used to fit. Now it bounces off. Your responses have changed. Your boundaries have thickened. Your perception has sharpened so violently that the same tricks look obvious from a mile away. You don't engage the same games. You don't enter the same contracts. That's why a return is impossible. Not because the world is kinder, but because you are different. They designed their traps for a version of you who still believed in their rules. Their systems were calibrated to control, to confuse, to wear down a particular configuration of hope and fear. But you reconfigured, you rewired. The same tactics become meaningless because your bandwidth has expanded and your tolerance narrowed. Where they expected collapse, you brought structure. Where they expected a reaction, you brought a boundary. Where they expected confusion, you showed clarity. That shift is permanent. It cannot be unlearned. Some of you worry, is this change for real, or is it just a temporary high change that lasts? Is not flashy. It's structural. It shows up as new instincts in your relationships, new filters for opportunity, new rules for how you let people close. It shows when you refuse to explain yourself to those who already ignored your truth. It shows when you choose calm over chaos because calm is more productive for the person you become. Temporary highs fade. Structural rewiring sticks. You've done the deeper work. The habits that got you trapped were dismantled, not masked. Here's the brutal encouragement. The world around you may stay the same, but it no longer contains you. You move beyond playing defense. You learn how to run the game. You don't need to prove anything to those who would have exploited you. You only need to protect the territory of your new self. That's why the old traps are irrelevant. They were never designed for your future, only your past. Remember the image of an old map. You used to have a route that fit an earlier version of your life. Now your terrain has shifted. The roads have changed. The bridges that once connected to dangerous places are gone from your map altogether. You don't get lost on old paths because you no longer carry the map that leads there. You possess a new chart drawn from lessons, scars, and sharpened intuition. So stand firm, chosen ones. If doubts whisper that you might regress, answer with evidence. New boundaries upheld, new decisions honored, new peace maintained. Your story was rewritten in real time. That remake is permanent. You walked in one person and walked out another, unrecognizable to the forces that intended to keep you small. The storm may exist still, but it cannot contain who you became inside it. This is liberation, not as escape, but as evolution. You aren't merely out of danger. You are beyond it. The cage was for the old you. The new you builds doors. Keep moving forward. Number 7, attacks failed because the wounds they once fed on have turned into armor. They stop striking where there's no blood. Predators don't hunt what's whole. They hunt the opening. Close the wound, and the hunter leaves hungry. Chosen ones listen. This is the silent reason you look untouchable now. The attacks didn't stop because the world became kinder. They stopped because you stopped offering an invitation. For a long time, you were exposed. Raw edges, open sockets, places that bled under pressure. Predators, people who thrive on chaos, situations designed to destabilize toxic systems. They have a radar for that kind of soft tissue,